Hi, everybody. This is Donna Reed from Up With People, Cast A, 1976. You probably know that by now because this is about my 20th interview. And it's been a minute because everybody's super busy, it seems like, in the fall. So today I am very excited to have someone who's currently living in Tucson and who I don't know very well. So welcome, Tom McKinney. Tell us a little bit about when you traveled, your first experience, kind of where you staged, early days of Up With People in your world.
Sure. I started way back in 1981 and 19 years old at that point and came from Massachusetts, grew up in the Northeast all 19 years of my life on the ocean. And my first plane ride ever was to Tucson. So I remember quite vividly, I don't know if it was a red eye or but I went Atlanta and then landing into Tucson in the summer over the mountains. And it was absolutely, not in the summer, actually in January. I staged in January. Okay. So it was absolutely spectacular and fell in love with the desert like right away. People used to say, oh, you're never going to be able to leave the East Coast and be away from water and the ocean. And I do miss that. But the mountains here are incredible.
So it's so funny. So were you then like cast E if you started in January? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because I think 78 was the first year we did that. I flew my first flight also, Tom, as an 18-year-old, but it was July and you still got off the plane and walked into to the airport in Tucson. And as an 18-year-old from the Midwest, I felt like I'd just flown to hell. Like
where am I? Yeah.
The heat and everything. Yeah. All right. So you traveled January through December then, right?
Correct. Yeah. And it was a new show then. So
what was the show?
Time for the Music.
Okay. And did you stage then here in Tucson for the 4 or 5 weeks? Or
we staged in Tucson. I lived in San Manuel.
Oh, wow.
So my host family for 5-6 weeks was with an LDS family in San Manuel.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible experience. I grew up Catholic. So this was, talk about putting you into a cultural change right away.
Yeah.
The Southwest, and then a whole different, philosophy and religion and stuff like that. So, but it was really cool. Yeah.
And were you, coming from San Manuel, because I was thinking I was way out by the casino. I was the furthest south I could be. We were like opposite ends. Were there others of you hosted up there? And did your host family drive you down every day, or how?
It was a bus, it was so long ago, Don. I mean, it's like, I can't remember. Somebody asked me what I was doing on Saturday, and I honestly, I don't remember.
Like, I don't know.
I think we had a bus. So we met in a certain spot in San Manuel, and then we bused. And I think our staging for the most part in January was at CDO High School.
Oh, so you were a little bit further north than when we were down at the university. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I just sold a house in San Manuel this summer. So that's a good 30 to 45 minute drive though, each way. Well, now you live down here too. So yeah. All right. So Time for the Music, because I was bicentennial, we didn't really have a name for our show. They started doing that kind of after that. What were some of the songs in your show?
Oh, I don't remember all of them. Just People was the opening number. I think we were the first group to do Song of Peace.
Oh, nice.
It was by far my favorite. Someone Else's Eyes.
Those are all good songs.
Yeah. And I think the last song was Time for the Music. I think that was the ending song.
I did
also did the La song.
The Who? Oh, La La La. That.
Yeah, that was a hit.
For us, that was a memorable tune. I think everybody had one of those in their show.
Yeah.
And when I interviewed Paul Caldwell, and I told him there were a couple of things, I was like, I didn't like that song. He goes, Donna, they can't all be hits.
I know. That's true. That's true.
All right.
All about audience participation.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny to think about it. If I hadn't lived here the last few years, I wouldn't know near as many songs as I do, because it's helping with reunions and hearing them year after year.
Oh, sure,
you know,
sure.
Because I in a little town in Northwest Ohio, I didn't, hear all of them. So now I've been to enough reunions, and the same songs keep getting sung at the reunions. So you end up knowing those. Okay. So, you were here for staging. Did you then go home and go back to Massachusetts? Did you travel as staff? What did you do?
I wanted to travel as staff, but my dad threatened that if I didn't return home after the year, like I had promised and finish my degree, that if I ever needed help in my life, he wouldn't help financially or whatever. He said, you promised. And I was going to be the first one to go to college from that group. So I went back and finished college in Manchester, New Hampshire at St. Anselm College. My degree, my bachelor's is in criminal justice.
Wow.
And they offered me a job off the road, and I said no. And at the end of 4 years, so I had to go back for 2.5 years of college, and then was offered, my goal was to be a state trooper, lawyer, FBI, judge, someplace in that thing.
Okay.
And I failed my state police eye test at the end of 4 years. And so you can have corrected vision, but I would have had to wait 6 more months to test again. And so Up With People called at that point, and this was in 1984, and said, do you want to drive a truck in Europe? And I'm like, sounds great.
Yeah.
I got my eyes fixed. I can drive a truck. So I went back on the road in 84A, and then I was in 85E, 86E maybe for a little while. And then I was a cast manager for 87, 88, and 89.
Wow. I had no idea that you had that many years. So the 84 group, and I don't know who's in what cast, but man, those 84s, I know a ton of them. I've served on the board of governors with them, and I've been to Sweden with them. And there's like a strong 84 group. And I know that when you've traveled in a lot of casts, because I only did 1 year, that you always have certain ones that stay more connected than and stuff like that. But
absolutely. But I was there 6 months as a truck driver, and then I did stage manager for a few years, and then cast manager. So
that's awesome. So what a fun thing. Hey, you want to drive trucks in Europe? I know,
seriously, isn't that great?
No,
I only backed over one small car once. I mean,
the equivalent of a smart car or something like
I blame it on the person backing me up. They weren't helping very well.
Okay, there you go. Whatever it takes, Tom. Yeah. So, alrighty. So then, so now we're to the end of the 80s, and what you're doing now in Tucson. So why don't we talk about that, and tell me kind of what that whole transition was in the years until, how many years have you been here in Tucson now with ICS?
I've been in Tucson for 7 years, and I've been with ICS 3.5 years.
Okay, and for everybody who doesn't know, tell us what ICS is.
Interfaith Community Services is a social service agency that works with 120 faith communities around Pima County, our county. And we provide a variety of services from transportation for seniors, meals for seniors. We have food banks, we provide financial assistance, and then we help people find self-sufficiency, whether that's jobs and or school, and a variety of things like that. So
yeah, you don't know this because this predates you, but my eldest son has had some challenges in life, and I've been there as both someone, from my church donating, and also on the receiving end for my son, picking up food and things like that. Cause I live only a mile from the church at Ina and La Cañada. So
getting close to us.
Yeah. So getting over to you is super close. Yeah.
I run into a lot of people that have been donors, volunteers, and then have become recipients, and especially during the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
So, I always tell people we're all just one incident from needing somebody's help. So when people come here, we really try to treat them with a lot of dignity and non-judgmental. Right?
That is absolutely, absolutely true. I have a good friend who's been out of work since the power's been out in Cape Coral, Florida.
Oh,
And yeah, you don't know how long that's going to be,
no,
right?
no.
You know, you just, yeah. So there's always the there, but for the grace of God go I moment,
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
what could be happening. So, how did you end up working into the nonprofit world? Do you feel like Up With People affected that at all, or how?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the reason that I didn't, when I went on the road, I didn't come off the road. I enjoyed that so much. So when I went back and at that point in time, when I left the road, there was a woman I met and we got married and we're divorced since then, but had 2 kids and lived in Minnesota for 20 plus years.
Okay.
And when I went back to Minnesota in 90, I only looked for nonprofit jobs. And so then I worked with, and I never thought of going back to law enforcement or anything. So I did the American Field Service, which was a high school exchange.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Then the YMCA's of Minneapolis, which I worked at for a while. While I was working, got my master's in nonprofit management. And then the last 10 years in Minnesota, I was with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I was the CEO of the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Oh,
so
that had to have been fulfilling.
Oh, this is a fabulous, fabulous job. So during all that time, ended up getting a divorce and reconnected with my 1981 cast couple. And she lived in Tucson. So for a few
All right, who is that? Who's that?
Dee Dee Connell.
I don't know that name. Okay.
Yeah, so she and I we were a cast couple in 81, and then she will tell you I broke up with her after we went back to colleges, that I dumped her. It could be true, but there was no Facebook, there was no cell phones. It was a quarter in the machine to talk to, so.
Yeah.
So we reconnected.
I'm sorry, I just was computing what you just said, a quarter in a machine.
In a phone, and it's in a phone, that's how you get to talk. And then people are lined up behind you. It's just
there's a whole generation that's gonna be like, what?
Yeah, I know. So so Make-A-Wish was great, 10 years there. And then at that point, my youngest graduated, and Dee Dee had moved to Minneapolis for about, I think she'd been there with me 3 years. But I always wanted to get out of the snow and the cold. And so we decided to come back to Tucson. Her family was here. And we did that in 2015. I worked for the symphony, for the Tucson Symphony, as their development director and then their CEO. But it wasn't really what filled my heart. I mean, it was fine and I enjoyed it. But when this job came, it really spoke much more closely to my passions and what I wanted to do. So
That's
up here.
Very, very cool. I, again, because I don't know that much about you, I love that story. I actually am going to talk to a couple of other people who met their spouses like at their 35th or their 40th reunion, or re-met, or, whatever the situation might be. There could be like a whole series. If we were doing segmented series based on themes, there could be a whole series on that, because I don't know, there's something about what you shared as young people that just ties you to forever,
And for the most part, you find out that person didn't really change. They still had the same values and all of those things. And I think that's what drew us back together and stuff. So
yeah. So, do you ever think about what your life might have been if you hadn't joined Up With People?
Boring.
Think you'd be in Massachusetts?
I don't know. I think that I probably wouldn't have left Massachusetts. I probably would have stayed out there. My parents were there, and all my family is on the Northeast coast. So I probably wouldn't have left. And I think I would have led a very sheltered life. I grew up in a pretty white community, Christian, Catholic. They weren't, I don't know that it was always the most accepting environment of different cultures and thoughts and people. So I think I would have grown up a very sheltered person.
I had someone, an alumni, say to me, it was kind of negative, sarcastic, but we're close friends, so I'm okay with it, about growing up in my little town of 500 white people. And I said, I didn't choose that. It was settled by 9 German men. That was not something I had a choice about. What the choice about is how you move forward,
Right.
and
Right.
what that looks like. And I said to him, no more than you had any choice about where you were born, right? Which is something we all need to remember always in this
Mhm.
world, right? With everything that we've been dealing with in the last, I don't know, since 1968.
I know, seriously, I was gonna say, has it ever stopped?
It comes around. So if you were going to talk, we don't know for sure what the next incarnation of Up With People is going to be. I've heard some rumblings, and I don't know whether your group of friends talks about this at all. There are those who just walked away from Up With People and whose kids never even knew it happened, right? That this was part of their parents' life. And there are tons and tons of options for young people right now for a gap year. If you were going to talk to a young person at CDO who had a choice to join Up With People or to do something else, what might you say to that student?
Well, I think if you want an education about the world and about cultures, this was the best way to do it. It really, in most places, wherever you went, it really allowed you to get to know people in a very short amount of time. It taught you to listen. It taught you to empathize with what people were going through or not going through. It showed you the good, the bad, and the ugly for you to be able to say, this is what I want, and this is not what I want. And I don't know that a lot of experiences do that. I think that was the host family experience.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was the cast experience, dealing with all these different cultures that have been brought up differently, and having, we talk a lot about this with our staff: respectful conversation, respectful debate. Don't always have to be right? It's that conversation piece that you learned to have, I think, in Up With People. That I don't know that you learn that in college. I don't know that internships teach you that, because you're always vying to be something special.
Like move up a ladder or something.
Yeah, and in Up With People, you could aspire to be the soloist, but if you sang like me, you knew you weren't going to be the soloist. So it was the social aspect of it, So I've become, and I don't know, maybe I was probably always an extrovert, but I'm very comfortable going into whatever situation with whatever group is presented to me.
I think so. This summer, when I spent the month of August in Europe and got COVID and plans changed, the word flexible just kept coming up, and I was so grateful for having been an 18 or a 19-year-old that had learned to be flexible so many years ago, and to make the best of whatever experience, was happening at the time. Yeah, I agree. I remember as a young kid joining, thinking that everyone would come from a situation like mine. Happy family, mom and dad married, blah, blah, blah. And then I got there and I was like, well, boy, was I wrong.
No, and the families you stayed with weren't anything like what you had grown up with, So I remember staying with a couple in Sweden. I think they had 2 kids, and they had been married. Well, they weren't married, which was so unusual for me. As, the way I grew up, and they had been together like 20 years. And I remember staying up with them till like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. And they said, there might've been some wine involved, but we stayed up that late. They said, it isn't a piece of paper that keeps you together. It's actually, you make a commitment and then you work at it. And they said, sometimes they have to stay up through the night to debate their differences and come to a conclusion. But people, they're feeling, people in other countries where paper defines you, so easy to, it's not the same commitment.
I have had that conversation with my youngest son, who traveled in 2013, and one of his best friends is from Norway. And because I'll keep saying to Caleb, I'm like, you've been with her 7 years, you should just get married. And his friend Andrea says, in Norway, we have 3 kids, 2 dogs, some sleds, some whatever. And then maybe.
Maybe, yeah. There has to be a good business reason, I think, for it, more so than the relationship itself, right? It isn't the relationship,
Right.
it's the paper that defines you.
Yes, and that's been a learning experience for me through life also to get used to. So, all right. So these are what are supposedly the quote unquote fast fire questions. We'll see whether they are or not. Was there a favorite food that you tried on the road, or a food that you tried that you would never ever eat again?
Well, I would definitely do paella again.
Oh,
I had that
okay.
in Spain, and that was absolutely fabulous, and mussels and all of that.
Yeah.
Anything I didn't like? I don't remember not. Well, actually, one time I did a short stint to Japan with just a group that was going to perform right at the end of my 89. And I remember sitting at a table with all the dignitaries and Up With People folks, and they passed around a raw fish with its head on it. And I think Ken McGovern said, they're going to watch you because you're the leader of this group, and you really just need to bite the head off and just chew it and eat it.
Well, that gives me chills.
I didn't like that very much. And then at the end, Ken leaned over. Everybody laughed, and then they said there are some fish that's good to do with. That wasn't one of them. So I think I was like, bamboozled.
Do you know Jose Luis Gonzalez? Did
Yes.
you travel with those?
Yeah.
So he had the 1,000-year-old egg thing in China.
Oh.
And yeah, it took him only that long to remember what he would never ever eat again. So
yeah, and I liked sushi, but I did not like that raw fish with the head. Not at all.
What about a favorite place that you maybe visited? Sounds like with all that, you've been a lot of places. So
yeah, I think there's two, I think. And then with the YMCA, I also went to Africa, which was incredible. But
nice.
On the road, my two favorite places, Japan was because culturally it was so different, and I stood out.
Oh, yeah.
That was, if you ever want to know what it feels to be stared at and looked at, it was really an interesting, incredible.
It makes me nervous to go there because I'm a 5'10" blonde. Yeah.
So that was great culturally. And then I think as far as environmentally or just nature wise, it was Norway in the winter. It was just spectacular. Just spectacular.
That's so interesting. I have cousins in Göteborg in Sweden, and I kind of want to go on Lucia Day in early December. But now I've lived in Tucson for 22 years, and I'm such a baby with the weather. I'm like, it would be really dark and cold to go there in December.
But the snow, it was magnificent. I loved it.
I bet it was beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any place that you haven't been that's on a bucket list that you might like to go to?
It's funny. I never went to Italy. And I'd love.
Oh my gosh, everybody talks about Italy.
I've gone to 22 different countries, 23, and I've never been to Italy. So, I think I would love to go to Italy.
Yeah.
I probably would go back to Japan to spend more time, but yeah.
Yeah, nice. All right. Any parting words for the Up With People world that you'd like to share?
No, I don't know if I have any parting words. I'm not, I think some of the questions you prepped me with was one, do you stay in touch with people? And I'm not so good at that, but I think part of it's why I don't go to reunions either. It's just 10 casts, all those people. And and if you're a cast manager, they always remember you for the good or the bad. But it's hard. It's always hard to remember all those students. So I don't always stay in touch. And I kind of that's the only piece I miss. I watch a lot of people on Facebook. In Tucson, I have more connections and stuff. I listen to my wife with her 3 best friends from our cast year talk on the phone, and they go on women's trips. And I kind of miss that aspect of it, but I'm not a good instigator for that. So I would say if you're out there and you want to instigate, and sometimes there are people like me that I'll go, but somebody's gonna have to prod.
My cast, I leave the 22nd, and our cast is having a reunion in Harrisonburg where John Hall has the camp. And there's probably 20 of us going. And then John Fenedich, I can never say his name. Fenedich. There was just 60 of them, 60 that got together. That is amazing to me.
Yeah, some casts are incredible.
But for me, it's kind of been the opposite. And part of the reason I'm doing these is, well, first of all, during COVID and just governmentally, there's been negative. And I just wanted to, steer it a little bit towards positive.
Yeah.
Positive. And, but there are definitely people in our cast, one of the friends that was my closest friend closed her suitcases when she got home, and her children never knew about Up With People until I visited one time and in Kansas City. And they were like, how do you know her?
Yeah, all our Didi has two and I have two, and they all four know and have heard plenty about Up With People. They force them to shows, all of that.
Yeah. All the stuff. So, well, thank you so much for your time. I'm glad it worked out. I appreciate it. And it's always good to see you at church once a year.
My pleasure. And I'll see you there again, I'm sure.
St. Mark's. We do.
All right.
Keep doing our thing. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.